This is Land of Havilah, Job 26. Coming up, Job will deliver his final remarks. Responding to Bildad, he says, verse 1, Then Job answered, How have you helped him who is without power? How have you saved the arm that has no strength? How have you counseled him who has no wisdom, and plentifully declared sound knowledge? To whom have you uttered words? Whose spirit came out of you? Comment in verses 1 to 4, Job speaking to Bildad. Job didn't call his name, but all the yous in that passage are singular in Hebrew, so he was responding to Bildad. Job's point is that Bildad doesn't compare to God. He's probably never done much to help the powerless, save the person with no strength, counsel the man with no wisdom, or instruct the man with no knowledge. In verse 4, where it says, To whom have you uttered words, and whose spirit came out of you? We would say, who do you think you're talking to, and where did that come from? Now, speaking of the terrifying majesty of God, which is far beyond Bildad's comprehension, verse 5, The departed spirits tremble, those beneath the waters and all that live in them. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. He stretches out the north over empty space and hangs the earth on nothing. He binds up the waters in his thick clouds, and the cloud is not burst under them. He encloses the face of his throne and spreads his cloud on it. He has described a boundary on the surface of the waters and to the confines of light and darkness. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his rebuke. He stirs up the sea with his power, and by his understanding he strikes through Rahab. By his spirit the heavens are garnished. His hand has pierced the swift serpent. Behold, these are but the outskirts of his ways. How small a whisper do we hear of him, but the thunder of his power who can understand? Comment in verses 5 and 6, the departed spirits, meaning the dead, tremble in the presence of God. All is open and laid bare to him, even under the seas, in Sheol and Abaddon. Sheol is the place of the departed dead. Abaddon means destruction or ruin. It's also translated place of destruction and pit. The bottom line is that God knows all places and is feared in them. Interestingly, in verse 7, God hangs the earth on nothing, which is counterintuitive, but scientifically correct. The earth's not supported on the back of a giant tortoise, as it is in Hinduism, or on the back of Atlas, as in Greek mythology, or by a giant tree, as in Norse mythology, or by celestial beasts, as in Chinese mythology. In verse 8, somehow God binds up water in the clouds and doesn't let it burst forth until he's ready. He hides himself in verse 9 by enclosing his throne and obscuring it with a cloud. In verse 10, there's a description of what we see from spacecraft in orbit, that there's a dividing line between day and night on the surface of the seas. Quote, He's described a boundary on the surface of the waters and to the confines of light and darkness. End quote. In verse 12, by his understanding he strikes through Rahab. Rahab's a sea monster of ancient Near East literature. And in verse 13, he's pierced the swift serpent, which is Leviathan, another Near Eastern literary creature. This is not to confirm their reality of Rahab and Leviathan, but that there's nothing in the known or unknown that can oppose God. Or these could be names of actual demons. In verse 14, these are but the outskirts of his ways, meaning this is just scratching the surface. And how small a whisper do we hear of him, meaning we're only beginning to hear about him. Job 27 is next.